on here to what we really want to start as our first topic. Tej, I think it makes sense right at this point before the Chiefs and Bills play each other next week, which we will surely preview on our Thursday show. Let's just take a check-in at the top three spots in the AFC. I'm going to, assume the Texans, they're going to move kind of comfortably out of the top three and into that fourth spot. For now, they could, maybe pull things together, particularly on the offensive end, that offensive line spot. We're really fighting here between the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens. So looking at the Chiefs first here for a second, I mean, I don't even know how to analyze them sometimes. It's almost a little frustrating. I guess it is kind of fun where like they're really just going to keep on winning these games. Like against the Broncos, I thought the Broncos defensive line did a good job dealing with the run game, creating some pressure. Then you get Mahomes extending some of these awesome plays. Of course, the Broncos go down, drive to win the game. They have that field goal blocked, which look like that takes skill. Like I'm not saying it's like, oh, it's fully a coin flip. Now, how often can you bank on that? Maybe not that often. At the same time, like even if some of these bounces didn't go their ways, what are they, like a 2-loss team kind of at worst? So for me, continued from the preseason through all of this, I don't think there's really any reason to push the Chiefs off of that first spot. I don't know if you have any thoughts there or if you're in disagreement.
I agree with a lot of what you said there about the Chiefs, where it is hard to evaluate them because you don't know exactly how much they're saving in the regular season for the playoffs. And they are at that stage in their dynasty where they're able to do that, much like we saw Bill Belichick often do with his defenses with the Patriots, where he was able to experiment a lot throughout the year to know what he could do would work and what wouldn't work in the playoffs. And I think we've seen that from Andy Reid this year on offense, where I thought that overtime drive against the Buccaneers on Monday Night Football was the closest to what we'll actually see from their offense in the playoffs, where they usually call a play action drop back on 10% of plays in general, like passes and runs included. In overtime, they called a play action drop back on 4 out of their 10 plays. So 40%. I think we're going to see a lot more play action from the Chiefs in the playoffs. You also had just the unique formations that they were using, bringing tight ends into the backfield, moving the running backs around the formation. Like that's also something that we'll probably see when their games start to matter more to them. And so, but the good thing I think that you see from the Chiefs so far this year is like a lot of the good players are still able to play at a pretty high level on your defensive line. Like Chris Jones obviously can get pressure at a pretty high rate. George Karlaftis and Tashawn Warden have played well. Like they've also been able to get pressure. Trent McDuffie, in the back seven is obviously a stud, and their linebackers have done a great job in the run game. And so that gives optimism on what their defense will look like in the playoffs. And the offense with Hopkins, should start to be able to get a little bit more explosive like we saw against the Buccaneers. So we'll just have to kind of see how that plays out as they develop chemistry. But the big thing for the Chiefs is they're currently sitting at about a 75% chance to get a bye per ESPN Analytics. That is going to be huge in the playoffs because not only do you get the one extra week of rest, but if the Bills and Ravens both win their first playoff games, they'll have to play each other. Well, the Chiefs will get to play the 4 seed. And as we're talking about right now, there's a pretty significant drop off from the top 3 teams in the AFC to the next tier of teams.
I love a reseed. Do you have any thoughts like the college football playoff? They don't reseed there. I was looking at that and I was like, oh, maybe I'm just so used to the NFL reseed, and I do really like it because as you mentioned, it's such an advantage for that top team. Like I saw you put something out just about maybe like specific spots in the college football playoff having an advantage. I mean, why aren't we just all reseeding here?
Yeah, I do agree. Like we should be reseeding. Yeah, like college football playoff. Like I don't know if people have fully realized this yet. Maybe it'll be realized once this first year of the 12 team playoff gets played out. But like getting the 5 seed is such a huge advantage because you play the 12 seed in the first round in a game you'll be pretty significant favorite in, like 14 to 20 point favorite in, and then you get to play the 4 seed, which is going to be whoever the Big 12 champion ends up being this year. And so while like the 2 seed is playing like the winner of like Miami Penn State or something, like a game that they'll actually have to show up for, like you'll be a double digit favorite again to get to the semifinals, while there's opportunity for the other top 4 teams to get knocked out. Like whoever gets the 5 seed this year, it'll probably be either Oregon, Ohio State will be in a pretty good spot entering the playoff.
I mean, just shoot for the 5 seed, right? Isn't that just a beautiful life motto? You just want to be in fifth place. I do want to ask you, like, when you look at the Chiefs, just their wins, there are so many games that are going to be one score games. And I could see an argument to be like, oh, they're used to being in one score games. I do think that they play like a particular brand of football where it is less explosive on the offensive end, it is limiting on the defensive end. So it's naturally going to create some of these tight games. But I mean, I don't know. We've talked for how many years now about just, one score games are variants. Like, literally, the ball can bounce in a different direction. If the field goal is not blocked, you lose that game against the Broncos. I don't know if you have any thoughts finishing up here with just the Chiefs dealing with one score games.
Yeah, the Chiefs are a very unique case when it comes to one score games. Where like some examples of this in the past when we've talked about like the Vikings 2 years ago, or like the Steelers the year before that, where it's like yeah, like they're winning a lot of one score games and they're vastly overperforming like not only what their prior is, but also what their fundamentals are in terms of like offensive and defensive EPA per play. And for the Chiefs, like they obviously have a better record than their actual team is. Like you need some sort of luck to be undefeated at this point in the season. But Robbie Greer had a really good point about this on Twitter, where he pointed out Patrick Mahomes is the highest win percentage in one score games of any quarterback in NFL history that has been in at least 60 of them, where he's won 70% of his one score games. Number two on that list is Peyton Manning, or sorry, Tom Brady at 68%. Number three on that list is Peyton Manning at 64%. And you have a bunch of other Hall of Famers on the list as well in the top 10. And so like Mahomes has this, ability to really string together like these types of game winning drives at a clip that we really haven't seen from any other quarterback in NFL history. And that's provided the Chiefs with a lot of the success in these one score games.
Yeah, I think maybe in the offseason we'll do our wins a quarterback stat, our one score wins a quarterback stat. Is anything really a quarterback stat? I am not really sure. Tage, let's move on to, I'll let you lead with who you think we should have as second here between the Bills and the Ravens, unless you have some fantastical other team in there. What do you got here for number two?
Yeah, this is very tough to split the difference between the Bills and the Ravens because I think they're so close to each other. But I'm leaning towards the Bills right now. And the reason for that is like fundamentals, third in offensive EPA per play, 12th in defensive EPA per play. Like I think those are both very high marks. Their defense is, considerably better than the Ravens defense right now. But I just believe in what Josh Allen can do as both a runner and a passer in the playoffs, where we've had this season where Lamar Jackson has been an amazing passer, like one of the best, if not the best in the league this year, but he hasn't offered much in terms of rushing ability. But Josh Allen has offered a lot in terms of his passing and rushing, and their weapons haven't been healthy for large portions of this year. Where now, if you get Khalil Shakir healthy and for the rest of the season, especially into the playoffs. Like he is someone who has a 68% success rate when targeted, which is one of the highest marks in the league. You have Keon Coleman for your explosives right now. Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid can also provide something as tight ends. And obviously James Cook is a good rusher as well on offense. And then on defense, Greg Rousseau is playing really well. Like he is becoming the type of pass rusher that can have games where he takes over. And then obviously in the back seven, like Christian Benford is having a great season. So they're just players I really like on both sides of the ball for the Bills that just give me a slight push over the Ravens right now in terms of power ranking them.
All right, I have the Ravens second here. The point on Lamar's legs is interesting because them not having to rely on Lamar's running, to me, that's a positive sign. That's not a negative sign. Like, it's not like Lamar got hurt. It's not like he can't do that, but that the offense can flow more comfortably under center. They're going to run play action, and Lamar's just going to be happy to deal with what is open. I actually think that is a positive for the Ravens offense because I think you can absolutely kind of break in case of emergency in that situation and just have Lamar like running again. Like you see it 3 times a game. We saw it against the Bengals where he's just making guys miss in space. I guess you could argue like, all right, well, the Ravens offense, if you were to even say, hey, I mean, whatever, they're second in offensive EPA, and I think the Bills are third. So it's like, well, the Ravens are a little bit higher. The Delta in defense, now that's a point where I'm like, okay, like I absolutely am concerned about the Ravens defense. Of course, we saw it against the Bengals on Thursday night where you're just able to attack the middle of the field against them. You really, really are. And it is really a problem. We'll continue to see what teams are able to do that. It's a little bit hard for me to remove the Ravens just fully taking it to the Bills, like in that game. Obviously, that game is weeks ago at this point. I think that Baltimore's defense looks worse now, and Buffalo's defense looks better now. Tron Johnson playing or had a really good game against the Colts. It sounds like Matt Milano is going to be open up his practice window. Of course, they add Amari Cooper, but I mean, Keon Coleman is still out. This is I just feel like you can't convince me on this one, Tage. Do you think I'm weighing too much the fact that they played each other, that the Ravens had that win? Is it just like I'm holding on to the remnants of Mike McDonald's defense? What do you think it is here?
That is a fair point about like not having to use Lamar's legs yet and still being able to have a successful offense. Like I guess I'll just have to like kind of see, is it like more of like a Jalen Hurts type situation from 2022 to 2023 where he just like wasn't as good of a rusher just because of like the way, either the way defenses were playing him, like kind of the speed that he had to offer him, or if they just like want to save Lamar's legs for the playoffs, which very well could be possible. But yeah, I agree with a lot of like your Ravens points. Like, second in offense VP per play, by far the highest explosive play rate in the league, where 14% of their plays go for 15 plus yards. But like the thing to me about like the head to head is, even though I think like the Bills playing every team in the league would do a little bit better than the Ravens playing every team in the league, the Ravens just like are a very good matchup for the Bills, where the Bills like play light on defense. That's kind of the style they have without the lack of linebackers. And like the Ravens love to use Derrick Henry runs, up the middle, Zay Flowers over the middle of the field, Rashad Bateman deep. Like there are just ways to beat the Bills defense for the Ravens offense that other teams I don't think have access to. So if they do match up in the playoffs, which, we talked about how they kind of have the collision course for the AFC semifinals right now. Like maybe that does end up being a problem for the Bills, is that they have to defend this run game that they don't really have the bodies to defend on defense.
I just keep on thinking back to that week one where we see Lamar do so much against Kansas City. And then my concerns right away are, you cannot rely on this. This is not sustainable. He can do it. He can do it for a full season, but you're going to face kind of lumps or bumps in the road overall. And I just have a hard time being like, all right, I'm going to praise the Bills for like finding ways in the regular season not to use as much Josh Allen's legs, and then criticize the Ravens for it. I have Baltimore's number two there. I think that's going to be a fun one where we're going to see it play out in real time. I think that'll be a good one for us to talk about in the future. I do want to move on to the AFC wild card here, Tage, where it feels like the picture overall is getting a little bit clearer to me. I think the real kind of, I guess, competitors, if you would call it, the Chargers, the Broncos. I still have the Bengals in the mix there, and then one other team from the AFC North, assuming that it's going to be the Steelers. I'm not even sure where we should start. I guess we can remove the Jets, right? I feel kind of comfortable moving them out of there. Are you good with that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate. Like, this Jets team, like, obviously has talent. Like, they had very high preseason expectations, for good reason. But like, the defense has just been really bad, and we saw that against Arizona. So yeah, it's time to remove the Jets from the playoff picture.
Our beloved Jets. Well, we will miss them. And of course, hey, there's still time in the season. Maybe you get a run. All right. So we're looking again at the Steelers, the Chargers, the Broncos, the Bengals. The Steelers have 7 wins. Bengals only have 4. Chargers sitting at 6 wins. The Broncos are at 5 wins. I don't think we need to talk about the Colts. They'll figure out whatever's going on with our guy Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson over there. Starting with the Steelers here, Tasha, I'm not sure if it's just my kind of bias against their particular offensive aesthetic, where they rely like so heavily on this, like a few deep completions a game. Where I think Russ was like 5 for 10 on throws, 10 or more yards down the field against the Commanders. You connect on a few, and then you end up winning the game. That they're going to end up playing really, really tight. Of course, they're going to be led by their defense, where they have just a tremendous defensive line. They ended up, I think, lucking out a little bit on that ankle injury later in the game. I did think in the game against the Commanders, they did a good job like compressing the pocket. The Commanders do a good job of throwing quick screens, obviously pushing the ball down the field and being able to run the ball. I think Washington did have some success running the ball, but Pittsburgh was able to take care of a lot of that. And I don't know, it may just be I just have to get over it. Like, the Steelers are good; they're going to be in the playoffs, and if Russ is happy to push the ball down the field enough times, no matter how like weird visually it's going to look, or how many times George Pickens is just going to make this absurd play, if Russell Wilson continues to have like a 12 A dot, I guess it's just going to work.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers like offense is going to live by the deep ball, die by the deep ball, where you have Russell Wilson in kind of this element of what he was best at in Seattle when he was in his prime, where like he throws one of the best deep balls in the league. His like 20 plus air yard throws have always been really successful relative to other quarterbacks. And we're seeing some of that again right now where he is able to complete these deep passes down the field to George Pickens, who's made some very impressive catches since Russell Wilson has started at quarterback. You have Mike Williams there, who was only on the field for a couple snaps yesterday, but made a very crucial touchdown. And he's the type of player that is really good at catching balls downfield. So Omar Khan has done a great job of kind of building this offense to do that one specific thing. And while it's working, it's going to look really good. There's going to be weeks where they don't connect on many deep balls and are going to need to rely on their defense and special teams to kind of even it out for them. But the good news for the Steelers is their defense and special teams are really good. I mean, they played very well against a very high end Commanders offense on Sunday, especially their pass defense, where they were getting pressure consistently, even without TJ Watt having a huge game. Like, Alex Highsmith got injured in the game. I think he's going to be out a couple weeks, but like he was someone who was getting pressure. Cam Hayward had the big sack towards the end of the game. Like they just have players on this team that can get pressure because their players are just better than a lot of the offensive lines that they're going up against. You saw the Deshaun Elliott tackling, some of the pass defense that they had from their linebacker group, where we saw Devin White even get out there and make a play. And so like they just have players that keep popping up on defense that are going to continue to perform well, and they'll probably have a top 5 defense the rest of the season because of that. And the last point I want to touch on with them is like they've actually done a good job of blowing out some of the teams that they're supposed to this year, which we haven't seen from Steelers teams in the past since Ben Roethlisberger had kind of declined, where the Raiders, Jets, and Giants games were all games they were in full control of. Like they needed some luck to beat the Commanders with some special teams variants, but like previously, like they've done a good job of actually, being in control of a game, not needing luck towards the end of the game to win in these fourth quarter situations.
Tage, off the top of your head, do you how many division games do you think that the Steelers have played so far this season?
I want to say one, but I can't
None.
remember
They
them
played
like I
none. They
specific.
played
Oh,
zero
okay.
division games. We're entering week 11. They played none in the division. So they have 2 games against the Ravens coming up. They have 2 games against the Bengals coming up. They play the Eagles in Philadelphia. They play the Chiefs as well. So the schedule, I think, is going to be really interesting, where I could see the bottom falling out a little bit, but I like that you mentioned the defense and special teams. That, of course, raises your floor. And then, I mean, they beat the Chargers early in the season. So if it comes down to something there, that they'll have that sort of advantage. Again, it can just be my a little bit of bias there, but you're right. I mean, they do play a really fun brand of football. Mike Tomlin just having awesome press conferences over and over. And I hate to be oh yeah, I need to see it against better teams, because again, like beating that Commanders team is really, really big. Like, well, we will talk about the Commanders, and have they beat any teams over 500? Maybe not. Does that mean anything or not? We'll see. But I'm excited that Pittsburgh has such a strong schedule going forward, because we're just going to see them in different ways, and certainly assume they're going to end up in the playoffs. So that, I think, will be a really, really fun one. I want to talk about the Chargers next here, where I mean, their defense is really just playing at a high level. I was really excited for this Chargers game against the Titans, because the Titans have had a lot of success on defense this year despite their record. And I mean, Justin Herbert just going full superhero mode. You see him scrambling, see him juking guys out, see him doing the pump fake, just pushing guys out of the way. Even like a design run on a fourth down was so fun to see. I am not advocating for Justin Herbert to have like 15 carries a game, but I wouldn't be mad if I saw it, just because he is so athletic and so good at that. It feels like he really raises the floor on that offense. And of course, you have an incredible quarterback that's going to help everyone. I mean, he just made this insane throw. I didn't even include it in my column because it ended up being a drop, but like just a ridiculous throw and a little bit of a microcosm where, hey, you're not always going to get the help elsewhere. But to have, all right, like you have a really, really good defense. You have, or maybe not, it's not dominant in the way the Steelers are. I'm interested by the end of the season, because the Chargers do also have a really tough stretch through the rest of the season coming up. I'm interested to see if it will be a defense that, in retrospect, I look at it and say, hey, it was really fun schematically, but it just wasn't like high end, where the Steelers are like the Steelers, I'm so solid on their defense. I think that's why I'm so comfortable sort of putting them in there. What do you have kind of on thoughts for our Los Angeles Chargers?
I really liked a lot of the stuff that you talked about there with the Chargers, and something that I thought was really interested when digging into their stats is they've played 34% of their snaps with at least a 75% win probability or higher, which is the fifth most in the league. So they've had a lot of situations where they've been leading in these games, or been control of the games, and they have played an easy schedule. Pro Football Reference has them at the fourth easiest schedule in the AFC so far, but third highest margin of victory is kind of like a testament to just like kind of what they're able to do to some of these bad teams that they're playing. And that really starts on the defensive side of the ball with them as well, where Jesse Minter is just pitching, these really good defensive game plans where he's able to use a group of defenders that isn't necessarily like a standout group, and still get really good production out of them. So I feel good about their defense. Right now they're about to play the Bengals, Ravens, and Chiefs in 3 of the next 4 weeks, and the Falcons actually in between that. So 4 high-end offenses. We'll see what they look like against those. But on offense, I do think that their ceiling is a little bit limited, just because of the lack of receiving weapons. But you look at Justin Herbert right now, his page on Sumersports.com. He has the same EPA per play as he did in 2023, a little bit better than he did in 2022. And what's interesting about him is higher average depth of target, higher time to throw. So he's still trying to create explosives without having the receivers like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams to do that for him. And his version of that is just pushing the ball downfield more, holding on to the ball in the pocket longer. And so you had that one play yesterday where the pressure came up the middle. He went off his back foot, like threw it 25 yards into the end zone, like it hit off his pass catcher's hand. But like if those are just caught more often, which is a big if for this Chargers pass catching group, like the Chargers often can start to hit a little bit more on some explosives, which could keep them in some of these shootout games that they might face these next 4 weeks.
I mean, Tage, we got you plugging the Sumer Sports data pages here. Stops is going to yell at me if I don't. Sumersports.com. Press that data tab at the top. Again, all the free data. It's fun. You can filter it in all these sort of different ways. I do really like that we're going to see a lot of these teams just play each other. Like the Bengals have the Chargers coming up. They obviously are going to play the Steelers twice. And they have the Broncos coming up. And then obviously the Broncos and the Chargers are going to play in division. So when we look at like the landscape of the league where there are just a bunch of 2-win and 3-win teams, there's also this like really meaty middle that I think is going to be a lot of fun with how teams stack up. And I love getting answers, Tage. I love asking questions, as you know, but being able to see just actually what's going to kind of fall out. And it doesn't have to be like this team didn't play anyone over this kind of stretch of weeks. Now we're really entering the time where I think we're going to see a ton of fun. The last two teams here, the Broncos and the Bengals. It feels like they're like almost inverse of each other a little bit from a team perspective, where the Broncos defense is really, really good. Like lights out defense. They were able to kind of handle the Chiefs in so much of that game. The Bengals offense is just a top unit where they expose the Ravens in so many ways. And like you end up coming down to that situation where, just an unfortunate kind of bounce of the ball for the Bengals stage. I'm not sure if you remember, like, I don't know if it was like 40 seconds left or something like that. The Bengals end up choosing to go for 2 there for the win. Of course, the Ravens would be able to then get the ball back and go ahead and drive back down on a day where it felt like they could absolutely do that. Obviously, have a field goal kicker where, he's fallen on a little bit of hard times, could still do that. I don't know if you had any thoughts. Well, I mean, candidly, I know that you had thoughts, but I don't know if you remember your thoughts from what feels like years ago, that Bengals Ravens game, just from that particular decision to go for 2 when you still have enough time on the clock that the other team may drive the ball down the field.
Yeah, I feel passionately about this decision with the Ravens to, or sorry, with the Bengals to go for 2 against the Ravens. And I didn't agree with the decision. I get why Zach Taylor and the Bengals like wanted to do that. Like your offense had been playing well all day. Like you want to take your chance to convert in that situation. But for me, the missing context of a lot of people's argument was how much more aggressive it would make the Ravens when they got the ball back with, I believe it was 34 seconds, 2 timeouts, to try to go and get a field goal and win the game. And we had just seen the reverse of the situation play out on Monday Night Football last week, where the Chiefs got the ball tied against the Bucks, and they had some intermediate passes, like didn't try to force the ball super downfield. And on 4th and 1, they just punted. We're happy to go into overtime. So if the Ravens ended up converting, or sorry, if the Bengals ended up converting to go up one, the Ravens would have been going for it on every 4th down, probably pushing the ball further downfield, and that would have increased their chance of scoring probably from around 40% to 60% in getting into to field goal range for an opportunity for Justin Tucker to make it. And so that's what really did it for me, is just like the percentage point increase in how likely the Ravens were to get down the field because of the increased aggressiveness is just why I wouldn't have gone for two in that situation.
I mean, Tage, all you data people come in, you tell us, go for two, be aggressive. Now you're telling us, hey, there's extra context. No, I do think you make a lot of smart points there. I think the biggest thing is, okay, that they would have 4 downs to constantly attack. That is absolutely big. You're gonna have just an extra down to literally attack. You're not gonna, like if that Chiefs situation, or if you have a situation where you're gonna just for whatever reason have incompletions early, you're just gonna end the drive. And I guess it makes sense. Like, you're looking at what is your break even point in. Do you think the offense has a 60% chance to get a field goal, or are you happy to deal with the 50% coin toss? Like, that is really what it comes down to, or I think from a math perspective there. So I think it's a good mention. I think it's something that we'll continue to look at, because like I'm just thinking about them kicking the extra point. Then I mean, I could see the Ravens just going down and scoring without going for it on 4th down. Like, it didn't feel like they had any problems all day. Or you get to overtime, the Ravens win. The question 100% goes to, hey, Zach Taylor, how come you didn't go for two? Like, is the locker room going to be okay with like your lack of aggressiveness there? And it's even funny when I know we've talked about Dan Campbell a bunch, and there are times when he is going for it, he is going for it, he is going for it, and you look at the charts and they're like, "Hey, Dan, like maybe not the most plus EV move here." Like, I kind of, one example is just that Cowboys game where it's like, well, I don't know, you're going to go for two from the 30-yard line if you keep on getting penalties there. So it's a fun little part of this silly little game. Back to the Bengals here. I just can't quit him, Tage. I just can't quit him. Their defense is bad. Like, it is a not good defense. It is very much going to hold them back from their ceiling this season. But the offense is just so good. Like, watching Jamar Chase play football is something I think we're really, really lucky to do. And it feels like they still have a chance. Like, they're still alive. Absolutely, because you also play the Broncos later. You play the Chargers. Of course, you come off of just like a really heartbreaking loss to the Ravens, but it still feels like it's, I don't know. Are they going to be like 4-10? And I'm gonna be like, no, they can still make the wild card. I do think, right, they're only really one game out of that. The Broncos between 4 wins and 5 wins there. So feels like we're just gonna keep on betting on offense, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean that's what it is for the Bengals right now, where you see this offensive explosion. There's not many quarterbacks in the league this year that are playing better than Joe Burrow is, especially with how often he was pressured against Baltimore, and what he was able to do in the pocket, moving to the right, trying to find Jamar Chase and his other pass catchers down the field. And then when you do have that true number one like Chase that can completely take over a game like he did against Baltimore, it's so helpful for an offense. And Chase, like the special thing about him is just like what he can do once he has the ball in his hands, where he does lead the league in yards after catch over expected right now per next gen stats. I don't think anyone is surprised by that. But like watching him and seeing the way that he speeds up while the ball is in the air, and then like hits another gear while he has the ball in his hands to get past the defenders at the second level, is like just not something that many receivers have. Like it's very reminiscent to Debo Samuel in a way of like what he's able to do with the ball in his hands after the catch. And on defense, like yeah, you're really hoping for like just like defensive variance in general, because like their defense just hasn't played well consistently week to week, where they had a good first half against the Ravens. Like they were getting some pressure, they were stopping the run game, but second half, just like they let up the Tylan Wallace touchdown. They just like haven't been good at stopping explosives in 2 years, and yeah, there's like not much faith in the Bengals defense, and so the hope is just like offense wins out over defense for them.